you created the habit in the first place. You can uncreate it and recreate something that's more supportive to you so that you do drink, but you drink from a different perspective.
Hey there, and welcome to the Evolving Ageless podcast. This is the enlightened woman's antidote to aging, and I'm your host, Michelle Dreilich. And remember, I am on a mission, right? I'm on a mission to change the way women age. And each week, I'm joined by experts in their field so that they can share with us the latest and greatest in the research and the science and what they're seeing working to help us live an incredibly vibrant, vital life. So again, remember, it's not about making radical change. It's about making little small improvements over time that make a big difference. So I want to talk a little bit today about sort of the seasons that we go through in life, right? This idea that we're never always in perfect balance, as much as we would love for that to be the case. And in life, right, sometimes we feel that complete balance, whether it's our work or our family life or our social life or our spiritual life. But then there are times where we tip toward imbalance, right? Maybe we're working excessively or too much. Maybe we become that helicopter parent where we're too engaged with our family and not giving them a chance to grow and do things on their own. Or maybe we're involved in lots of family drama, right? Even our social life, we can over social our lives. But more importantly, I think any of these times of imbalance usually bring with them a certain amount of stress, right? Think about it. We've all had work stress and family stress and even social stress and certainly spiritual stress. And so even though these times in our lives can bring like excessive joy, right? Like all things in life, they're balanced. There's a balance to it. And we have periods of less joy and more stress. And so that is why I'm super excited for my guest today. Today, I'm joined by Georgia Foster, who is going to rattle the cage about what you may think about drinking. And I'm talking alcohol, right? But she's going to do it in a super positive way. So Georgia's known as the go-to girl for over drinking around the world. Actually, she's staked her claim kind of in Australia and the UK, helping thousands and thousands of women deal with over drinking, anxiety, emotional overeating, self-esteem, all of these things. So I just want to introduce you with a huge warm welcome to Georgia Foster. Hi, Georgia. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you here because, like I said, I really do think you're going to rattle the cage on the way we think about this whole topic. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's start with this idea that drinking is kind of part of a social behavior or part of a behavior that we have worldwide, right? Not just in the US, but worldwide.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe there's nothing wrong with drinking. And my slogan is, it's the thinking before the drinking that's the problem. And a lot of people are socially shy and they'll use that little sneaky drink before they go out while they're putting the makeup on to get themselves in the right mood or whatever. And I think that drinking is something that we use for emotional, medicinal purposes. Um, and often, people who work with my program will say to me, "Oh, Jojo, I had no idea. I'm always the driver when I'm out with my friends, but as soon as I come in the door, I have to drink that whole bottle of wine. What's my problem? Everybody thinks I manage my life really well, but I'm drinking too much secretly." And these are all the things that I work with because, I believe that there's nothing wrong with drinking. It's what happens before that we need to focus on.
Mhm. Yeah. So why do people drink?
Well, I believe people drink because they are shy, anxious. A lot of people drink because they can't sleep because they have that busy brain syndrome. One of the biggest reasons that people drink is that they're bored with their lives. They may live on their own and they use alcohol as that form of entertainment. I call it the solo party moment where, and I'm not saying not drink, I'm very much a firm believer, I know that some of these websites that you read, they say things like, if you think about drinking before 12 o'clock midday, then you've got a drink problem. I'm saying, no, there's obviously an anxiety issue here or a negative thinking issue here. So I think it's a bit like saying, well, why do people want to eat a whole packet of cookies? Nobody wants to eat a whole packet of cookies, and nobody wants to drink a bottle and a half of wine or whatever. I think that what people are really, I think because it's such a taboo subject that people feel shamed and embarrassed. And I want to blow it out of the water and say, you know what, a lot of us maybe drink too much, but you don't have to quit. For most people, there is a middle ground of drinking. And I'm a firm believer that this is a good opportunity for some people to recognize that, yeah, they may drink a bit too much, but you know what? That's okay. We can deal with that.
Which is so radical, right? If you think about it, because we tend, and maybe it's a US thing, I'm not sure, but we tend to judge everything, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. And so what you're proposing is really radical that way, in that, right? There's a middle ground for everything. And it does make sense, right? Because there is a balance. And if we think about alcohol, it predates, it goes back thousands and thousands of years that it's had a place in our culture and our rituals and things like that. So it's, and I myself, I'll be honest, I have fallen into this so often, this idea that coming from a nutrition background and functional medicine, coming out with this idea that like, it's so bad for you, being so judgmental about it. And the reality is there's a fine balance with everything that we do, right? So is that true? Like there is a middle ground?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. We've always had something. I mean, wine has been in whiskey and all that. I mean, it's been with us for a very long time. It's obviously been misused with some people, and I'm not anti people who want to choose to be sober. I'm not about that at all. There are people out there. It's the right lane for them. But I think a lot of people, they, I think we're talking about, in particular with women, because they want to look good, feel good. I mean, alcohol puts on weight. We know you get the booze belly from that. And people, all these things that come with it, that it's bad for you, that it's bad for your liver. Well, that's true, but so is processed food. So it's really about, as you're into, it's about getting that balance. And sometimes when life's stressful, like maybe it's financial situations or empty nest syndrome when your children are left and you're feeling a little bit lonely, we have an emotional brain and people forget that. And alcohol is something that produces more dopamine. So people aren't hooked into the alcohol necessarily. They're actually hooked into the feelings that it gives them. And I'm very much about, if you're drinking to feel more relaxed or to be more confident or to feel more sexy or witty or if you're shy and you'd like to drink because you think you're going to be boring unless you drink. These are all the perfect reasons why your mind can change. And, it needs a bit of practice, of course. And that's what my program is about, 7 Days to Drink Less, is to train your brain and body to feel better about yourself before you drink. And I think a lot of people, when you get used to thinking that alcohol is going to give you that personality trait or calm you down or help you sleep, your brain works on autopilot. So then people say, Georgia, why can I not just have a couple of glasses of wine like my best friend or my mom or my partner or whatever? The reason why is because your brain has become habitually conditioned to drinking in that way. And that's what I love about, this is my favorite subject in my work life. And I've been in this business a really long time. And I just feel so, passionate being in the coalface with people. I had a clinic in London for 22 years. And, people are really scared to talk about it. Whereas what I'm saying is we need to stop it, because ironically, the more we don't talk about it, the more people tend to drink because they think they have really got a problem. And then it can get out of hand. So I'm here to say, you know what? let's get you in that space before it gets to a place you think that there really is a problem, and then it can become a problem.
Ah, I wonder, that's fascinating, right? So what you're basically saying is there is a point at which drinking is a problem, right? There is a place where we say, this is behavior, or this is, I don't know if they use the word addiction, right? But this is something that is a bigger problem. But I think the way I've understood it from you is maybe more people put themselves or are lumped into that category than need to be, because it's really understanding why you're doing this, right? I love how you said it. I've seen you say this before, where you said it's not that you're an alcoholic, you've just developed a drinking habit, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's a habit that you can break, right? And it doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that it's radical. And again, I think we are quick to put something in a bucket and judge it as being so destructive. So I think just even starting the conversation, opening it up to allow people to realize, I loved what you said also, it's normal. This is normal behavior, right? Just like I said in the beginning, we ebb and flow in our lives, right? There are times in our lives where we eat too much. Look at any holiday, any major holiday, right? But then we rein it back in again when we realize, okay, holidays are over. It's time for me to buckle up. If that weren't the case, January would not be such a huge month at the gym, right?
Yeah.
So we're
Dry
used to that.
January.
Yes, right. Dry January. Great. So let's talk about what are the personality types that you've uncovered? Because I think people can find themselves in this space and understand a little bit maybe more about the psychology behind what they're doing.
Mm. Well, when I discovered this particular psychology training, I trained in California, and it just blew me away because I myself had been Australians are big drinkers.
Yes, right.
Anyway, we're known as big boozers, so there's nothing new there. But when I discovered this particular psychology theory, I went and trained in California, and the theory is that we're all made up of many parts or sub-personalities. And the one personality trait that drives us to drink is called the inner critic. And the inner critic is the part that says, why did you drink too much last night, when you wake up in the morning with a bit of a hangover? And then you think, oh my God. And the first thing is, in a nanosecond, because the brain doesn't like feeling vulnerable, says, oh my goodness, when can we have the next drink? And I'm not saying that person will have a drink straight away, but through the day, there'll be a little bit of a bubbling, and then maybe something stressful happens in the office, or one of your kids trigger something, or even at the school gates, whatever it is. And the inner critic originally was there as when we lived in caves and there were bears around the corner and would forewarn us about what was going to happen. But in modern day society, the inner critic is there wanting to chomp away at your self-esteem and make you feel anxious. And so if you have a strong inner critic, and you, in your history of your life, you have used wine or a gin and tonic or a cocktail to calm your nerves, or to make you feel safer, or to deal with the stresses of life, your brain will tend to default. And so the inner critic, what's interesting about alcohol is that when we drink alcohol, the inner critic goes away. So people aren't getting hooked into the alcohol. They're getting hooked into having some space. I call it escaping the radio crazy in your head. It could be you're not slim enough, you're not young enough, all these things that start to happen as we get older. And
Oh,
that
it's huge.
criticism,
Smart enough, thin
oh,
enough,
yeah,
right? Successful enough, a good enough
uh-huh,
mom,
uh-huh.
a good spouse. I mean, the list goes on and on, the inner critic. That's amazing. So
And
I'm
this is,
sorry, keep going.
no,
It's
it's just
crazy.
that, yeah, it is. And this is the one, alcohol is the quickest way to shut it down. So that's what I really want people to know, is that this isn't a drinking issue. This is a thinking issue, and that we need to work on our self-esteem. We need to work on actually honoring who we are. And there is another part that's the opposite to that, which is the intuitive part, the confident part, the healthy part, the part that's listening to this moment right now that says, you know what, actually, I am present in that person's life. But the reason why they aren't more present with that thinking is because the brain works on habit. So my program is about training that person to actually tune out of that inner critic and bring in that intuitive self that says, you know what, I'm an adult, I can drink, but there's not that gotta have that drink moment, because they're handling that inner critic. I mean, the bad news is you can't get rid of your inner critic, but you can learn to manage it. And, you know, it's such a wonderful gift to give to yourself when you think, actually, you know what, that inner critic's just one voice. And I think a lot of people think it's all of them, but it's just one part of their thinking. And when I learned this particular theory, I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, my inner critic had been running my life, my show, you know, my platform. And I think that when you recognize the damage that it's been causing your self-esteem and you know, even down to, you know, overeating or attracting wrong relationships or whatever, because we, you know, we have, you know, some other drinking personality traits. One of them is the perfectionist. And the perfectionist is the all or nothing drinker. They're either really drinking a lot, and then they go, that's it, I'm done, right? Then they go to the other side and they abstain for maybe all week or month, or say, right, I'm going to have dry January or dry July or sober October or whatever. And they'll go through the motions of that. But the issue is, if you haven't changed your relationship with alcohol, you haven't changed your relationship with the inner critic, then the perfectionist will tend to retreat back to the old drinking ways. So my program is really about changing the dynamics of that perfectionist, so that, you know, the bell does ring when you've had enough, because perfectionists tend to drink really quickly too, because they're driven, they're very successful, they're high achievers. So when they drink, it's just to get away from being perfect and just like, right. Oh, I don't care anymore. I want to just be in the moment. I guess because perfectionists are very good at focusing on the future. They're not very good about being in the present. And, you know, and there's nothing wrong with being a perfectionist, because you will set good goals. And, but one of the things is they don't trust themselves with alcohol. They have a real anxiety about alcohol, actually, because they have negative references about how they drink and how much they drink.
Okay, so that's the perfectionist. Are there any other personality traits that you've uncovered?
Yeah. And then there's the pleaser, and the pleaser may seem the opposite to the perfectionist, but they can be one and the same person. You know, some people can be really driven in their work, but at home they are the real nurturer. And the pleaser wants to make sure everybody's loved and liked. Everybody needs a pleaser at a party, because the pleaser will make sure everyone's fed, everyone's got someone to talk to. They're quite intuitive as well, but their biggest issue is pleasers can't say the word no. So they will eat too much, drink too much, get themselves into some sticky situations. They'll say yes to things when they really want to say no, because they're worried about being rejected. But the thing is with the pleaser is they drink to communicate. So a perfectionist will be happy to tell you what they think sober, but a pleaser will drink to say something that they feel is important to discuss. But the frustration of the drinker is the person they're having that discussion with will often blame the booze. So I say to people, if you really want to have an important discussion with somebody, is you need to educate yourself, and that's part of the program, to communicate sober, so that people realize you mean business, you know, rather than, you know, having that drink for a bit of Dutch courage, or, you know, that bit of confidence. Yes. But pleasers tend to attract bullies, because bullies love pleasers, because pleasers always think what's wrong with me? And so what I love about this psychology theory is working with people with alcohol issues, is it's, you know, it's nothing wrong with being a nurturer, but it's being discerning about who you want to really please and who you don't. So this is all about self-esteem and being perfect at being in a better space before you drink, because we want the cortisol and adrenaline's pumping you there. We want that to be to not be there, and the inner critic is what produces those negative chemicals, and that's why when we get to the booze, it extinguishes it.
That's incredible. So we're talking about, I mean, the more and more you talk, right, we realize that you're talking about changing the brain, which we know can happen, right? We often think of it like, oh, people don't change, you know, you don't change your personality, but your brain does change. And so let's talk about that for a minute, because that's really the basis of everything that you've pulled together.
Yeah. Well, I went to London and I trained to be a clinical hypnotherapist. And in those days, it was a bit hocus pocus. But what I love about my work now, it's been, you know, proven by many neuroscientists like Dr. Bruce Lipton, David Hamilton, you know, very famous authors in the study of the brain. And that statement that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is completely unfounded. I love it because, you know, by the time people would find me, they're sick of themselves. They're bored of the drinking. They're tired of it. They want to get over it, but, you know, they don't want to go into, you know, long-term therapy. And I'm not saying therapy is a bad thing either, but what we do know is that the relationship with food, alcohol, cigarettes, whatever it is it becomes a habit, an emotional conditioning. And through hypnosis, you can make those changes very quickly. You know, I call myself a progressive therapist because I believe a lot of the problem is the history. So your mind will default to where you've been. It will default to how you've behaved in a nanosecond. So when you wake up on a Monday and think, that's it, I'm not going to drink all week, and then all of a sudden you have an argument with your mother-in-law or something happens and you feel really vulnerable, your brain will go, oh, get me the wine. Oh, get me the cocktail. And as I said, it doesn't mean you won't drink then. It's the fact that your brain's already planned and strategized. That's your solution. But when you work hypnotically, you can go to that part of the brain that manages your emotional conditioning, and you can, even in a window of 20 minutes, which is the goal that people can do every day over the 7 days, you can basically a train track that goes to a station, then you just shift that train track and it goes another direction. It goes to the neural pathway, which is here, which is called the prefrontal cortex. And in the prefrontal cortex is where we're intuitive, we're calm, we make good decisions, we're logical, we have self-esteem. And that's what I love about working with this program, is that you are going to that part of the brain that loves change, that embraces change, that is not scared of it.
That's incredible. So you know, historically, we think of alcohol or alcohol use or abuse that, you know, it's using motivation, right, to quit. And this idea of motivation that can be, I mean, as we've all learned, if we had to rely on motivation to get us through our tough challenges, we wouldn't get very far, right? Because our motivation is fleeting. It comes and it stays with us and then it's gone. Again, going back to the gym in January idea, right? The reason why so many memberships in a gym, you walk in a gym in March and it's empty again. So it's the idea that people rely on motivation. And I think even a lot of well-respected alcohol programs work on this idea of using motivation.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is important that a lot of people don't understand is when your conscious mind has great plans to do something, and it might be something you're successful at for a week or maybe a few weeks. But if the unconscious mind, or the subconscious mind, as some people call it, if that part of the mind has a different opinion, i.e. that we use booze to feel more interesting or to help us sleep or to feel calmer, then what will happen is there'll be a conflict. And a lot of people think the conscious mind is where we resolve things, but it's actually the deeper part of the brain. So the unconscious mind will win the argument. And that's why people say to me, Georgia, I don't have any willpower. I'm saying, you know what? There is no such thing as willpower. you've got to get both parts of the mind to be congruent. They have to agree. They have to shake hands and say, we know where we're going now. And that's what I feel. By the time people recognize that they want to drink less, their self-esteem is so low because they've been using willpower when actually they should be using the deeper part of the brain that stimulates emotional conditioning. And when people can just take that little bit of time out to work with that part of the mind, amazing things can happen. So that whether it's going to the gym, whether it's to, lose weight, or, to do something that's goal orientated, you have to educate the part of the mind that knows it's safe. Because once again, if you have a history of feeling like a failure in a particular experience, your mind will say, well, whoa, don't go there. All we see is failure. But if your mind sees success, which is what hypnosis can show you, is that we're building a new platform, a new library of references, where you're not using your history of drinking too much. You're using a new emotional conditioning, because hypnosis is great because it's, it's that little window of time before you go to sleep at night. It's a natural brainwave experience. We all have to go into hypnosis before sleep. You can't go to sleep without going through this particular brainwave. It is a form of meditation. It's a little bit different because you're goal-centered with hypnosis. But what's brilliant is that you can change that train track. And that's what I love about it. You've got to get both parts of the brain to be congruent.
Yeah. And so in your experience in working with just thousands of people, what are the signs that maybe this method is not working for them? Like, is there a parachute or, an ejector switch where you say, you're going to need to go in a different route?
Yeah, it's a good question. If reduction doesn't seem possible, if you are a perfectionist and you feel that you just find it easier just to quit, and you just don't feel that it's right for you, that's a great idea. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of trauma in their past, and that alcohol, really triggers that trauma or stimulates, I always say to people, if it's ruining your relationship, if you feel the reduction is something that is just too much of a struggle for you after trying the program, then quitting would be the best solution. But I think that a lot of people, I had met with head of psychiatry of one of the most well-known private clinics in London, and I asked him, he was head of addictions, and I asked him, what is the percentage of addictions? What is it emotionally based? How much can you calculate that? And he said they think that an addictive personality is 80% driven by emotions. And I said to him, what's the other 20%? And he said, well, we don't know. It could be 100, but we can't say that. And then there are people who say, well, Georgia, I've come from a family of alcoholics. And I think a lot of people worry that they might be that person, but everybody's different and everybody's an individual person. So, people who may have those concerns, I would seek some advice. But, a lot of people are talking about just they're hardworking people who live responsible lives. They're not getting in a car, drink driving, and they're not this person who is sitting on a park bench. These are fully functioning adults I'm talking about here. Mums who are feeling, women, and obviously this program is for men as well, but noticing that it's just getting a little bit out of hand, but not recognizing that there is a habit going on here. And that's where I step in and say, you created the habit in the first place. You can uncreate it and recreate something that's more supportive to you, so that you do drink, but you drink from a different perspective.
Oh, this is, for me, this is, I've even always come from this black and white place. I am the perfectionist, in case you haven't figured that out. And so I get it. I'm off or on. There's very little middle ground in my world. And so In fact, there's probably not a year on record that January did not bring working out to me. Like I'm that on-off person. And so I understand it. It makes so much sense to me. And what I love about what you're saying, and I love the name of your program, right? 7 days to drink less. It's not this like insurmountable task that your whole life is riding on the success of you stopping something for good forever, for till the end of time. This is hey, let's take the edge off of what you're doing. Let's back off of it, because if you've recognized that it's a pattern that's not positive in your life, then there's some psychology to it, then there's something going on. And I just love how your whole concept, your whole program, everything that you've done is around making it the person's responsibility to doing that introspection, to doing that learning about ourselves. And I think so few people actually do that. In fact, I think we look for answers that are either in a pill or in a, how do I give this to something else? How do I get it off of my plate and give it away so that I don't have to think about it? I also think your words about trauma were really moving in that, and that it is the thought process that drives the behavior, and so I think if we all think about our inner critic, I think it'd be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't have an inner critic that talks to them in a very negative way. I think we all carry those demons around with us, and so I think your approach is just brilliant and so freeing. I think it brings a freedom for people to recognize that they can own something and that they can learn a process that can enable them to overcome a difficult challenge. So what I know you also have a free ebook too. So Georgia has a book called The Stress Less Mind, in addition to 7 Days to Drink Less program. Both of these links are on the evolvingageless.com website in the show notes with Georgia Foster. And so you just click on those and you'll be able to learn more about the 7 Days to Drink Less, learn more certainly about Georgia Foster and everything about your program, your methods, your education, and your training. I think it's just brilliant. And again, our inner critic very often comes from a place of stress. So the idea of a free ebook on the stress less mind, right, is right on there. It just goes hand in hand. There's one quote that you said, and I just love it. And I would love to, we'll end on it, and then you can maybe go a little deeper on it. And your history does not represent who you are, but rather who you thought you should be. I'm going to say it again. Your history does not represent who you are, but rather who you thought you should be, right? So we're talking about expectations, but it's a weird word to put with history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, and once again, is because of our history, we, tend to think that that's where we're going to be. So, and that's why the inner critic is really important to get in check, because the inner critic is only working on history. It doesn't have a crystal ball. And a lot of people think that it does, because it'll say, you're going to screw up and drink too much tonight, or you're going to put on weight this holiday because you eat and drink too much. And, we can, tend to fall into self-fulfilling prophecies because of the inner critic, but it can't see into your future. And it's such a relief to know that, what that inner critic says is from history, and it doesn't mean my future. So I really want to emphasize that to everybody, that you have a mind that is pliable and adaptable to change. We all have that mind. And so my goal is with anybody, I have a great self-esteem program called Believing in You. And in it, I talk about that charisma. And, we want to become naturally more confident. I mean, charisma is something that you don't have to be this aesthetically beautiful person. Charisma is something that is when you have that beautiful air to you and you walk into a room and people just love your energy. That takes practice. And once you get your inner critic in check, you can start to look into your future with so much more positivity and so much more confidence. And I think everybody deserves that. We're not born with self-esteem. We have to learn it, and life can erode it. And so I feel that sometimes people's history can really drag them back, and the potential of them that is there, as I said, that intuitive you, the part that's listening to this interview right now can be more present. It just needs to be practiced and exercised.
Your positive, uplifting message, I think, is for everyone to hear. It really doesn't even just apply to that. It really is powerful. I just want to thank you so much for being here today, sharing your message, your free ebook, The Stress Less Mind, your program, 7 Days to Drink Less. Again, it's not an insurmountable thing. And I love that it's normal. This is normal. This is just
Absolutely.
a stage of ebb and flow in life. So thank
Absolutely.
you so much for sharing such a powerful, important message and your mission of changing lives. So join me again next week at the same time in the same place, and where we'll dive into something new, a new topic that helps you live ageless. Bye for now.